Hey everyone, we're at Donkey Projections. I'm Eric and we have Lucas as always.
Hey everyone.
And we also have a special guest today. We are featuring God of Politics.
Hello.
Today is December 29th, 2020, 2 days until the new year. And today we will be talking about the 2021 New York City mayor elections. More specifically, we will be covering which candidates we think will make it to the top. And we will also be pulling up a map of New York City and talking about which candidate will do the best in what borough.
Yep, and we have God of Politics, as you said. He is from New York City himself, and we will be linking his channel description. Please go check out his channel. It's a great channel. And with that being said, let's go right into it. So, as many of you probably have heard now, Andrew Yang, who was the former 2020 presidential candidate, is very likely going to be running for mayor of New York City. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of you probably know his most famous policy here, which is the freedom dividend. Eric, you want to explain this?
Yeah, so basically what UBI stands for is Universal Basic Income. What that basically means is that every adult citizen receives a certain amount of money on a regular basis, right? It's like at a certain rate, and that's what Andrew Yang wants to do. And to some people, yeah, as it says on his page, that would be $1,000 a month and $12,000 a year, which is a supplemental to what they may make or may not. It depends on the person, and that's something that he wants to propose, and that's appeals to some people, and to some people it may not.
Right. He ran on this platform for president, and I do remember him saying that he would probably run on this platform again for when he's running for mayor. And I think that this is probably what he's very, very, very well known for. Taking a look at the other policies he does have. Oops, where did I go? He is an interesting type of candidate. I think I saw a bunch of videos about how not only do the Democrats like him, but some conservatives really like him too. He's called the internet's favorite candidate. A lot of people think, or at least Republicans think, that he isn't really, a Democrat for some reason. He's more of a independent thinker. He doesn't really fit with that Democratic tag next to him. And I think he'll definitely be a really, really interesting candidate in the 2020 election. We'll continue to discuss him during this video. So now we're going to head into the candidates for this election. There are a ton of Democratic primary candidates. So we're not going to be discussing the Republican primary candidates because they essentially have zero chance of winning anyway. But there are a ton of really good Democratic primary candidates, and I think that this will definitely be a very, very competitive primary for sure. And we're going to start discussing only five of them because we think that only five of them really stand a good chance of winning this. And I want to pass it off to God to start discussing Eric Adams.
Yeah, well, there's a number of different candidates. As you mentioned, there are five main candidates that I would say definitely on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, they don't have much of a chance at all. But specifically to Eric Adams, he is the borough president for Brooklyn. And you have had borough presidents that have been elected to the mayorship in the past. You had David Dinkins, the first black mayor of New York City. He was the Manhattan borough president. So Brooklyn is also the most populated borough in the New York City. And so he might have a lot of appeal to those voters. And I think that he does have quite a good chance of winning due to a lot of those factors.
I absolutely agree with you on that. I think Eric Adams does have a really, really good chance at winning this. Another candidate we were discussing was Sean Donovan. Sean Donovan, as you can see here, was the former U.S. HUD secretary. That is a pretty big position. He served in the executive presidential cabinet before, and it wouldn't be too surprising to see him as the mayor. However, we do believe that Sean Donovan is one of those lesser candidates of the five that we're discussing today. The main three that we're discussing are going to be Eric Adams, Scott Stringer, and Andrew Yang. So Sean Donovan, he's in play, but he's not really, that huge front runner that we're really going to keep in a strong eye for. All right, I'll pass it again to you, God, on Scott Stringer, since you are from Manhattan. The next candidate that we will be discussing is Scott Stringer.
Yes, well, Scott Stringer is the current New York City comptroller, and he was also the Manhattan borough president. I've actually met Scott Stringer before, and he is quite a nice guy, but he is also a candidate that is running for the New York City mayorship. He's been in New York City politics for quite a while. He was also in the state assembly for 12 years, going all the way back to the early 90s. So he is definitely a figure that could do well in this primary. There's a lot of questions, a lot of criticism that you could make of him, saying that he'd be too similar to Bill de Blasio. Maybe people want something different in someone like Andrew Yang, but I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, Scott Stringer is definitely one of the main candidates that I do see being in play for the mayorship. And I do think that, yeah, he's definitely one of the main candidates.
I think it's important that you also explain like what a comptroller is, because I don't think a lot of the audience members really know what a comptroller is if they aren't from, New York City.
Yeah, well, comptroller is they basically manage the finances of the city. They control the debt. They're elected to a 4-year term. It's not appointed by the mayor, but it is a term that he is elected to. So he's been elected by the city before. But yeah, they basically manage the finance of the cities. They do reports on the economy and the bonds and the debts, all of that. So yeah.
So it's a pretty experienced position, kind of like our Treasury Secretary in a sense.
Yes, yeah, for
On a
sure.
small scale. Yep. All right. Eric, we'll head to you for Andrew Yang and outgoing Representative Max Rose.
Yep. So, as we know, one advantage that Andrew Yang has to, to most people of New York City and in general, if people are interested, is that he has been fairly popular throughout this whole year. We started off in the 2020 race. He was a pretty prominent, unique candidate, and as it said on his website, he was an entrepreneur, or he maybe still is an entrepreneur on the side. He's not a politician, and that maybe does strike the eye of some people. And he was pretty prominent not only after he dropped. I mean, yeah, he was prominent after he dropped as well, right? He helped Joe Biden campaign in competitive states, and he did some campaigning in the Georgia area. And now that he's running for mayor, he has a lot of recognition and popularity. And there was, I remember, a video of Tucker Carlson, which is a conservative reporter, having a conversation with him on his channel. So he's a pretty all-around interesting and sort of approved person, which may strike the eye of some people in New York City. And Max Rose, he is a representative who actually lost his race in the New York area, and he is trying to get a seat in some sort of government, and he's trying to run for New York City mayor. Max Rose is a pretty moderate candidate, I think even more moderate than Andrew Yang. So it's going to be interesting as to who the people of New York City like to pick more.
Yeah, Max Rose is incredibly centrist. I remember seeing one of his ads. He basically said Bill de Blasio was the worst mayor that New York City has ever had. He was a representative for a pretty conservative area of New York City. He won in a major upset in 2018 against, I believe it was Dan Donovan. His district covered the entire Staten Island area. And what we're going to head into now are the boroughs. And one of the biggest issues of Max Rose is that he served his constituents were from Staten Island. And if you know anything about New York City politics, Staten Island is very, very Republican compared to some of the other some of the other boroughs here. Staten Island has like very not that much Democratic primary turnout compared to the other boroughs. In the 2020 presidential election, Staten Island was the only one of the 5 boroughs to go to Donald Trump. Every election, or I don't want to say every, but a lot of the elections, Staten Island has been voting for the Republican candidate. It is more conservative, more suburban, less urban compared to Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx. So although Max Rose might do well in Staten Island, that's not going to be enough to win the election, or the primary, I should say. He's, in my opinion, I think he is too moderate for the people of New York City. New York City is known for being very, very progressive, and I don't think that the other boroughs would necessarily like such a moderate candidate here. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, well, Well, I think that's certainly true. I mean, if you want to look at Staten Island, it is the least populated of all the boroughs. It has just under 500,000 people, and it actually hasn't gone to a Democrat in the mayoral race since when Ed Koch won it back in 1985. So it's been quite a while, and it is known for being a very conservative area. And while Max Rose was the representative from there, he was defeated this year by Nicole Maliotakis, who, funnily enough, was the mayoral candidate back in 2017, and she won Staten Island by a landslide in the mayoral race in 2017. So it's going to be quite difficult for Max Rose to win because, again, his main constituency that he will be able to do well with if he does go far into the primary is going to be Staten Island. But again, it doesn't have nearly as many people as the rest of the boroughs, and it isn't nearly as democratic. So that's going to be one of the main issues that he will have. And that's why I think that while he is a major candidate and while he is well known to some people, it's going to be difficult for him to win.
All right, I think that's definitely a very good point made. Let's look at some of the other candidates here. Let's head to Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. What are your thoughts on how well he's going to do in the Brooklyn area?
Well, I guess I can speak on that. I mean, I'll let Eric talk about this as well, but definitely Eric Adams will be a big candidate, especially in the Brooklyn area. Again, he's the Brooklyn borough president, and Brooklyn does have more people than any other borough at around 2.5 million people. So he's definitely going to do well, especially if you're looking at the map here around, Bedford Stuyvesant, East New York, Flatbush, areas with a lot of African American voters. He would be just the second African American mayor in all of New York City history. So that would be quite historic. And I think that he would certainly be one of the big favorites along with Andrew Yang.
I absolutely agree with you on that. And Eric, you can talk a little bit about Andrew Yang, probably the Queens area, how he might actually do quite well here.
Yeah. So, it's not always the case that, one race votes for a candidate of the similar race, but Queens, specifically the Flushing area where the U.S. Open Stadium is, that's probably what it's more known for. It has quite a significant Asian population. And if those people, resonate with Andrew Yang, this could be quite a pickup for him, right? Queens isn't the most populous, like Brooklyn is, but it's a pretty significant borough. And if Andrew Yang is able to pick that up, if he wins the primary or it's whatever the situation is, this would be a lot of help. And going back to Brooklyn and that God of Politics mentioned, being the most populous borough is the most important, right? That will edge out Queens because once again, population means more votes come from there, and therefore that benefits you more, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of Asian Americans do like to see an Asian American running for office. I don't think a lot of Asian Americans have been running for office. And I think I remember the Wikipedia page giving Andrew Yang some credit here, saying that he's kind of what's the word here? He's inspired a lot of Asian Americans into politics because you really don't see that many into politics. And I think for that reason, we could see a lot of support in Queens for Andrew Yang. Let's head to Manhattan now. I think this is where Scott Stringer will do very well. Scott Stringer has been the Manhattan borough president. I think he is pretty well known within Manhattan. He could pick up some votes here. Now, I do want to say, though, I think Andrew Yang will also do pretty decently in Manhattan as well. Manhattan has also a very high minority population, and I believe that Andrew Yang did do some work in Manhattan as well. And I think he will do pretty well in Manhattan, but probably not as well as Scott Stringer. God, what do you think of that here?
I think that could certainly be true. I think Scott Stringer will do the best in Manhattan. I think he does have the most name recognition of anyone in Manhattan, besides probably Andrew Yang, because, of course, he did run for president. But Scott Stringer is definitely a candidate that could do well in Manhattan, particularly in the more affluent areas. I think that's where he'd do well. I think Andrew Yang would do well with more working class voters. That was a lot of his message when he ran for president, that he was, standing up for working people, especially in those Midwestern areas. Maybe some of that resonates to working class people in, areas like Harlem, areas like East Harlem, Washington Heights, those areas of New York that are very working class. So I think that he could definitely pick up a lot of votes there, and that does make him one of the big favorites.
Absolutely. What do you think about the Bronx? Who do you think will shine in the Bronx here?
Well, yeah, I guess I can speak to that. I do think that someone like Eric Adams could possibly do well. I think the Bronx may be one of those battleground areas due to the fact that you don't have a specific borough president running, you don't have a specific person from that area. But I do think that Eric Adams would probably be able to do well in that area. Maybe him and Andrew Yang both being some of the big favorites would be able to do well. But Eric Adams being able to appeal to a lot of those voters, I think. But I also think Andrew Yang, as I pointed out before, he would appeal to a lot of those working class areas. So I think the Bronx could go between Eric Adams and Andrew Yang. But really, I mean, that is going to be the battleground area. You have a lot of Hispanic voters here. You have a lot of black voters, and that would be a very important area.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
And the last thing we did want to check here was the polling. There's only been 2 polls conducted so far, but I think we should probably discuss them. Eric, do you want to discuss this?
Yeah, and 2 notes about polling. One is about specifically to this race and one in general. We're pretty early game for now, right? The primary of this race is only scheduled to be in June, so we have quite a few months, and who knows what might change. But right now, Andrew Yang, according to the first poll that we see here, has 17% of the 17% of the vote, and that's a quite Eric Adams is trailing by a little bit. And the rest of them don't have that much, single digit percentages. And, the second fact is that, with the polling regarding the previous elections, there might be some, skepticism about, whether to trust them or not. So it's not our main indicator, but for now, Andrew Yang has 17% from the first poll, and Slingshot Strategies, another pollster, has him at 20%. So there's a pretty distinctive lead, and that's the thing polling shows us, right? It's probably not going to show us direct percentages, but it paints some sort of a picture as to how much ground candidate is picking up compared to single-digit candidates that are shown.
Absolutely. And I think taking a look at the other poll we have here as well, it also shows Andrew Yang at 20%, Eric Adams trailing a little bit behind, 14%, Scott Stringer's up there too, 11%. As you can see, I think that our interpretations of the race itself before taking to polls is kind of supported by the polls here. Max Rose only has 6% in the total this poll, and I think that's no surprise because first of all, Staten Island isn't that populated, and then second of all, we got to remember this is the Democratic primary, and Staten Island is quite conservative. So even though Staten Island is already the least populous of the 5 boroughs, there's going to be even less people voting if it's the Democratic primary. And so for those reasons, looking at it right now, we do think that Andrew Yang is the best bet here, but there are still 2 other candidates, Eric Adams and Scott Stringer. The 3 of them, this is going to be a very, very tough battle to see who will win. All right, and that is the end of the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to God of Politics for coming. Great commentary provided. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. If you like our content, please subscribe. We'll see you in our next episode very, very soon.
See ya.